All right, Baltimore. We'll start with this one. Last night, I'm watching the game last night, and I'm thinking, I'm going to come on the show, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to say, yeah, you know what, it's unfortunate, but Baltimore's going to be the team to beat in the AFC. And part of me still feels that way, despite the fact that they lost that football game last night to the Buffalo Bills. But they blew it. And something Reed alluded to earlier in the game, or earlier this morning, I should say, was that Baltimore's 0-1, Cincinnati's 1-0. And Baltimore looked like perhaps the best team in the National Football League, and then Derrick Henry fumbles late, and then you just give Josh Allen some life, and obviously that is an issue for you if you're going to be doing that if you're the Baltimore Ravens. So my takeaway is this. I'm not really fired up to play those two games against Baltimore, to be completely honest with you. Obviously, we're going to embrace it, and we're going to do the best we can as a fan base to go out there and support the Bengals, and hopefully they're successful in those games. I got lots of concern with playing Baltimore, especially with what transpired yesterday in Cleveland. But the reality of the situation is you are a rung above Baltimore on that divisional ladder here at this point. You sit at 1-0. They sit at 0-1. Yeah, they played really well. Yeah, they did some dynamic stuff. Yeah, Derrick Henry's still amazing. Yeah, Lamar Jackson appears as though he's taken another step in the right direction as far as his improvement as a quarterback, but they lost. And, situationally, they've always found, in my opinion, that's kind of been what has held Baltimore back. Because you look at their roster, you look at their organization, DeCosta, their general manager, Harbaugh's been there forever. Obviously, he's won a Super Bowl. Lamar, top 4 quarterback in the National Football League. You can debate the order. We'll do that at some point on the show. But he's clearly a top 4 quarterback, and you haven't won a Super Bowl, and you haven't even been to one yet with him either. And you kind of scratch your head and wonder how that is possible and how that's the case. Well, the answer is situationally, you just always find a way to shoot yourself in the foot and make a mistake late in the game, whether it be a dropped ball that we saw against Buffalo in the playoffs last year from Mark Andrews on the 2-point try. Whether it be, a silly penalty, right? You're holding on to a guy where maybe you shouldn't have been holding on to a guy. Or roughing the passer, right? And you saw it with a fumble from Derrick Henry yesterday, a guy that was having arguably probably the best game out of any single player throughout the entirety of Week 1. Derrick Henry was having it, but then you look at the game after the game and you sit there and say, well, that's kind of what lost Baltimore the game when you had that fumble late from Derrick Henry. So Bengals are very fortunate that Baltimore dropped that game. Obviously, Bengals fans and the Cincinnati Bengals as a team are continuously going to be rooting against Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland throughout the year. But you caught a break that Baltimore lost that game. Heartbreaking game for them. They're going to respond. They're going to be just fine. But, you have an advantage over them in the standings because you were able to execute successfully on Sunday, and they were not. All right, let's transition a little bit to Pittsburgh, because I think this is another interesting conversation piece there as well. I think a lot of people kind of dismissed Pittsburgh for, coming into this year. A lot of people have written Aaron Rodgers off, right? He's, Joe Flacco's age, right? 41 years of age. At one point, 4-time MVP. Bona fide Hall of Famer. You can write it in, all this, but he's kind of washed, right? Some people had this mindset, and I kind of came on Chatterbox Bengals, and I've been saying this for a long time. Do I view Pittsburgh as necessarily a threat to win the Super Bowl? No, but they're going to be a lot better than they have been these past few years. And mind you, these past few years, they've still find ways to make the postseason and have a winning record with Mike Tomlin. Now you give him a quarterback. Is Aaron Rodgers the same quarterback he was when he was rattling off MVPs in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur? No, he's not, right? Age, right? These things happen, right? It happens to everybody. You saw it happen with Brady even there at the end. It finally hit him, but age eventually will catch up to you. You're not going to be the same player you once were. But based on what they can do defensively, they're always going to be a problem on defense there with TJ Watt. The Cincinnati Bengals team knows that. Bringing in Jalen Ramsey as a cover guy, as a corner that hits really hard too, by the way. Saw that certainly yesterday when he hit Justin Fields, right? And you saw it when he hit Garrett Wilson late in the game. He's a hard hitter. He fits in great with that Pittsburgh defense. They've got some weapons offensively, right? Freiermuth, the tight end. They draft Caleb Johnson, the running back. He didn't really do much, of course, in the game yesterday. Jalen Warren's certainly a guy that they look at. But Aaron Rodgers is a distributor of the football. And if he can do that and not turn the football over with that defense, they're going to be an issue as far as competing with them in the AFC North. And that's kind of where I view the Bengals right now here at this point. I would love to sit there and say, yeah, the Bengals are on Baltimore's level, and, they're probably going to win the division. Well, they're probably not at that level, if we're being completely honest. They're probably at the level of Pittsburgh. And you're in a situation where you're saying, if you can probably be a little bit better than Pittsburgh, definitely at worst go 1-1 against them, hopefully go 2-0 against them. Maybe that's the team that you can vault over to get into the playoffs for that wild card spot. Again, Hopefully they win the division. Hopefully they can take down Baltimore. Hopefully they win a bunch of games. They can compete for the 1 seed after starting out 1-0. That's what we all want, right? But I'm just trying to live in reality with where I think this team is right now at this point. I think Baltimore is probably going to find a way to win the AFC North despite starting 0-1. I think they'll get it figured out. I think they'll be just fine. I think the Bengals will kind of be sitting there competing with Pittsburgh, and that's going to be a tough task with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback. I don't think he's in a spot where he is just about done. I still think he can play really good this year. Now, if he gets banged up, right, or if he has a lower extremity injury and he can't move around the pocket as well or outside the pocket, then we'll have that conversation again. But based on how he looked yesterday, he looked really, really good, and Pittsburgh certainly is going to be an issue for Cincinnati in the 2 games going forward. And, of course, having to deal with that defense there as well, because a lot of similarities are shown between what Cleveland can do defensively with Myles Garrett and with what Pittsburgh does defensively there with T.J. Watt as well. And I think that's going to be something that Cincinnati has to understand. And like when they're playing Pittsburgh and when they're playing Cleveland for the second time, it might get messy like that, where Joe Burrow, is taking shots and you're not able to necessarily string together really quality drives late in the ball game, and you're going to have to rely on your defense a little bit. And based on what we saw Sunday from Cincinnati, I think you're in a decent spot to be able to do that. All right, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the National Football League here at this point. Lots of, obviously, games yesterday, lots of takeaways to be had. And, I want to spend some time talking about Green Bay, because Green Bay was my pick to get to the Super Bowl in the AFC, or the NFC, rather, coming into this season. And I thought they looked really, really good on both sides of the football. Green Bay is the youngest team in the National Football League, so there's obviously some cause for concern when you're picking the youngest team in the National Football League to ultimately go out there and compete for a Super Bowl. But I'm really impressed with Jordan Love and what he can do, and schematically what Matt LaFleur can do as well. And we were kind of talking about this off the air here at Chatterbox. He constantly finds ways to get his playmakers in open space, right? There were several situations in that game where Jordan Love had guys running wide open, and Love was able to put it on him. I think Jordan Love is going to kind of this year ascend into that next level of quarterback recognition. I think more people are going to be talking about Jordan Love this season. Obviously, Trace Fowler is a Packers fan. I'm sure he's excited about that, but I think the Packers are really going to take the step in the right direction for them and really be looked at as a bona fide Super Bowl contender. Obviously, they make the trade for Micah Parsons a couple of weeks ago, right, or a couple of days ago, really, and he certainly can provide some juice for them on the defensive side of the football and kind of offer just some pass rush, right? That is what Micah Parsons can do. He is big, he's physical, he can fly around, he's athletic, he can be lined up in different spots along the defensive front, and I think Green Bay is going to be a really big problem for teams in the NFL this year. Now, on the flip side of that, you have Detroit. That game was it ended up being a 2-score game, but really that was not a close game, right? Green Bay rather, really dominated that game. And I think Detroit's a team that's probably going to take a step backwards, right? You're looking at Detroit. Obviously, they lose both coordinators. Aaron Glenn, he goes to New York. Ben Johnson, he goes to Chicago. We'll talk about that in a second tonight for the Monday night game. But Dan Campbell, obviously he's really aggressive. He likes going forward on 4th down, what have you. But without Ben Johnson, without Aaron Glenn, I think you're going to see him struggle a little bit more this year. Jared Goff, when things are going well around him and he's got really good pieces and he's got really good play calling, then he can execute. But if you ask him to do a little bit more, and really a lot of it more this year, considering what they have lost, I think they're going to struggle a little bit, and I think they're going to take a step back. I still think Detroit is a playoff team, but I don't think they can necessarily compete with Green Bay at the top of that NFC North spot.